While shopping at a local store, Elon Musk, a figure renowned for his groundbreaking innovations, witnesses an elderly woman struggling with her groceries. Moved by her predicament, he steps in with genuine care, offering help in a way that surprises onlookers and softens even the toughest public image. His spontaneous act of kindness not only transforms the woman's day, but also ignites a ripple effect throughout the community, proving that even the most celebrated figures can make a profound impact through small, heartfelt gestures. A weathered hand trembles as it reaches for a can of soup on the top shelf, fingertips barely grazing the metal rim. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead in the small neighborhood grocery, casting harsh shadows across Eleanor Wilson's lined face, a face that has witnessed 8 decades of triumph and heartbreak. As the can wobbles precariously at the edge, a tall figure moves into frame behind her, his silhouette unmistakable to anyone who follows the news of innovation and industry. The can falls, but instead of crashing to the linoleum floor, it lands in an outstretched hand, a hand that has signed billion-dollar contracts and launched rockets to space. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Wilson had always prided herself on independence. At 82, she still lived alone in the modest 2-bedroom house where she'd raised 3 children after her husband Robert passed away unexpectedly in his 50s. The small blue house on Maple Street in Palo Alto had witnessed 30 years of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary Tuesday evenings, where Eleanor would sit in her worn leather armchair, reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, working through the daily crossword puzzle. This Thursday morning had begun like most others. She'd woken at 6:15 a.m. without an alarm, a habit formed during decades as an elementary school librarian. After her usual breakfast of toast with a scraping of marmalade and a cup of Earl Grey tea, Eleanor had checked her kitchen supplies and realized she needed to make a grocery run. Her arthritis had been particularly bothersome lately, the changing autumn weather causing her joints to ache and swell, but she refused to let it slow her down. Just another challenge to overcome, she muttered to herself as she pulled on a light cardigan against the morning chill. The weather app on the smartphone her granddaughter had insisted she learn to use showed clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for her 3-block walk to Westridge Market, the family-owned grocery store that had served the neighborhood since 1972. Eleanor gathered her canvas shopping bags. She'd been environmentally conscious long before it became fashionable, and her weathered leather purse. She paused at the small table by her front door, where a collection of framed photographs chronicled her life's journey. Her fingers lingered on the image of Robert in his Navy uniform, his confident smile frozen in time. Next to it stood a recent photo of her 3 children with their spouses and her 5 grandchildren, taken at last year's Thanksgiving gathering. "I'll be back soon," she said to the empty house, a habit formed after decades of marriage and family life. The neighborhood had changed dramatically since Eleanor and Robert had purchased their modest home in 1967. What had once been a quiet, middle-class community now sat in the heart of Silicon Valley, with home prices that would have seemed like science fiction in their day. Tech executives and startup founders now occupied many of the renovated homes on her street, their Teslas and luxury vehicles replacing the station wagons and sedans of decades past. Eleanor had watched the transformation with a mixture of fascination and concern. The influx of wealth had improved many aspects of the community: better schools, immaculate parks, impressive infrastructure, but had also driven out many long-time residents who could no longer afford the skyrocketing property taxes. She remained only because she'd paid off her mortgage years ago and qualified for senior tax exemptions. As she walked carefully along the cracked sidewalk, Eleanor nodded politely to a young couple jogging past in matching athletic wear, their ears plugged with wireless earbuds. They smiled briefly in return before continuing their conversation about stock options and equity packages. The disconnect between their world and hers felt vast yet strangely intimate in this shared space. Westridge Market came into view around the corner, its hand-painted sign and brick facade a stubborn holdout against the sleek, modernized businesses that increasingly dominated the commercial landscape. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as Eleanor entered, the familiar scent of fresh produce and baked goods welcoming her. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson," called Marco, the owner's son who had recently taken over more of the day-to-day operations from his aging father. At 45, Marco had grown up in the store, just as his own children now helped after school and on weekends. "Hello, Marco. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Eleanor replied, her voice warm with the affection of a long-time customer who'd watched him grow from a mischievous boy into a responsible businessman. "Perfect for our new shipment of Washington apples. Just came in this morning." He gestured toward a carefully arranged display of gleaming fruit. "The honey crisps you like are particularly good this season." Eleanor nodded appreciatively. "I'll definitely pick up a few. How's your father doing?" Marco's expression softened with concern. "Good days and bad days. The physical therapy is helping with his mobility after the hip replacement, but you know how stubborn he can be about following doctor's orders." "Indeed I do," Eleanor chuckled. "Tell him I said hello, and that I expect him to listen to his doctors, so he can get back to beating me at chess in the park." Their weekly chess matches had become a tradition over the past decade, two seniors connecting over a game that required the mental acuity they both worked diligently to maintain. As Marco returned to restocking a shelf, Eleanor retrieved a small shopping cart and began methodically working through her list. She'd planned a simple beef stew for dinner tonight, with enough leftovers to last through the weekend. Her daughter Catherine had promised to visit on Sunday, bringing her husband and their teenage son for their monthly family dinner. The market wasn't particularly crowded this morning. A few other retirees nodded in recognition as they passed each other in the aisles. Two young mothers with toddlers in tow compared organic baby food options in hushed tones. Near the dairy section, a harried-looking man in a business suit spoke urgently into his phone about delivery schedules and supply chain disruptions. Eleanor maneuvered her cart through the familiar layout, selecting carrots, potatoes and onions from the produce section. She chose a small package of stew meat from the butcher counter, exchanging pleasantries with Tony, who had been cutting meat at Westridge for nearly 20 years. Her list guided her efficiently through the store until only a few items remained. It was in the canned goods aisle that Eleanor encountered her first real challenge of the day. The beef broth she needed had been moved to the top shelf, well beyond her reach, even if she stretched to her full 5'3" height. She looked around for assistance, but the aisle was momentarily empty. "I can manage," she murmured determinedly, spotting a small step stool at the end of the aisle, placed there specifically for shorter customers. Moving carefully, mindful of her arthritic hip, Eleanor positioned the stool and stepped up, her hand extended toward the can of broth. The pain shot through her wrist unexpectedly as she reached, causing her to wince and momentarily lose her balance. The stool wobbled precariously beneath her. In that instant, Eleanor felt the weight of her years and the vulnerability of a situation with sudden, frightening clarity. Simultaneously, in another part of the store, Elon Musk was having an unexpectedly normal morning. Despite his astronomical net worth and celebrity status, he occasionally sought the centering routine of ordinary tasks, grocery shopping among them. His security detail had reluctantly agreed to remain inconspicuous, allowing him a rare moment of normalcy in an otherwise extraordinary life. Dressed in simple jeans and a dark t-shirt with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, he'd managed to blend in reasonably well. Most shoppers were too absorbed in their own tasks to notice the tech mogul selecting breakfast, cereal and coffee beans just a few feet away. Elon had been in town for a series of meetings at Tesla headquarters reviewing plans for the next generation of autonomous vehicles and sustainable energy solutions. The weight of these world-changing decisions, coupled with the constant scrutiny of investors, media, and the public, had left him mentally drained. This impromptu stop at a local market rather than sending an assistant had been an impulse decision, a small rebellion against the isolation that often accompanied his position. As he turned the corner into the canned goods aisle, Elon immediately noticed the elderly woman on the step stool. Something in her determined posture and the careful way she moved spoke of both vulnerability and resilience. When the stool began to wobble, his response was instinctive and immediate. Moving with surprising speed for a man who spent most of his days in boardrooms and design studios, Elon reached Eleanor just as she began to lose her balance. One hand steadied her elbow, while the other prevented the can from crashing to the floor. "I've got you," he said simply, his voice calm and reassuring. "And I've got this too." He held up the rescued can of beef broth. Eleanor's heart raced from the near fall as she carefully regained her footing and stepped down from the stool. "Thank you," she breathed, looking up at her rescuer. A flicker of recognition crossed her face as she took in the distinctive features partially hidden beneath the casual disguise. "You're—" she began, then stopped herself, noting his subtle gesture of discretion. "Just someone who needed some groceries this morning," he replied with a small smile. "Are you all right?" Eleanor nodded, composing herself quickly. "Yes, thank you. These old bones don't cooperate as well as they once did." She gestured to the can in his hand. "That was the last item on my list, actually." "Perfect timing, then," Elon responded, placing the can in her cart. He glanced at the other items. She'd gathered. "Looks like stew for dinner." "You have a good eye," Eleanor said, impressed. "My husband's recipe, I've been making it for over 50 years now." "The best technology is often the one that stands the test of time," Elon observed thoughtfully. "May I help you to the checkout?" "These carts can be unwieldy." Eleanor hesitated only briefly. Pride had been both her strength and her limitation throughout her life. Yet there was something in this man's manner, a genuine respect rather than pity, that made accepting help feel like an exchange between equals rather than charity. "I'd appreciate that," she decided. "I'm Eleanor Wilson." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Wilson." "I'm Elon." He offered his hand, which she shook firmly. As they walked toward the checkout area, Eleanor found herself sharing snippets of her life story. Her career as a librarian, her late husband's work as an engineer, her grandchildren's accomplishments. Elon listened with surprising attentiveness, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a genuine interest in her experiences. "My youngest granddaughter is studying aerospace engineering at MIT, Eleanor mentioned proudly as they waited in the checkout line. "She talks about your companies all the time. Dreams of working for SpaceX someday." Elon's eyes brightened with authentic enthusiasm. "We need more brilliant minds working on the future. The problems we're tackling require diverse perspectives and fresh thinking." That's what I tell her. "At my age, you understand that progress doesn't belong to any one person or generation. We're all just adding our small contributions to a much longer story." This comment seemed to resonate deeply with Elon, who nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes I think we forget that in the tech world, the continuity of human innovation across time." Their conversation paused as Marco rang up Eleanor's purchases. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized Elon, but he maintained professional composure, following the tech mogul's lead in keeping the interaction low-key. "Will that be all today, Mrs. Wilson?" Marco asked, bagging her groceries carefully. "Yes. Thank you, Marco," Eleanor replied, reaching for her worn leather wallet. "I've got this," Elon said quietly, already extending his credit card. Eleanor began to protest. "That's very kind, but completely unnecessary." "Please," Elon insisted, gently. "Consider it my thanks for the most genuine conversation I've had all week." There was something in his expression, a hint of isolation despite his fame, that made Eleanor relent. She understood, suddenly, that this small gesture might mean more to him than to her. "Very well," she conceded graciously, "but you must let me repay you with a proper cup of tea sometime. The fancy coffee shops around here don't know the first thing about brewing a decent cup." A genuine smile spread across Elon's face. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Wilson." As Marco finished processing the payment, the small interaction had begun to draw attention. A few shoppers had recognized Elon, despite his casual attire, and smartphones had discreetly emerged to capture the unexpected scene. One of the world's wealthiest individuals helping an elderly woman with her groceries in a neighborhood market. Eleanor, noticing the growing attention, leaned closer to Elon. "I believe your cover is blown," she observed with a touch of amusement. "It appears so," he acknowledged, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "Would you allow me to carry these to your home? I have a feeling leaving separately won't make much difference now." Eleanor considered the 3-block walk home, her arthritic hip already protesting from the morning's exertion. "If you're certain it's no trouble." "Not at all," Elon assured her, gathering her grocery bags with ease. As they exited the store together, the billionaire innovator and the retired librarian, the incongruity of their pairing was not lost on either of them. Yet there was also a natural rhythm to their conversation, a bridge formed between vastly different lives united by a simple act of human kindness. What neither fully realized in that moment was how this chance encounter would soon ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their own in ways neither could have anticipated. Today, autumn sunshine warmed Eleanor's shoulders as she and Elon walked the 3 blocks to her modest blue house on Maple Street. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from the neighborhood's transformation over decades to the philosophical implications of space exploration. Despite the gulf between their experiences, there was an unexpected ease in their exchange. "That's me, just there," Eleanor said, gesturing to her home with its neat garden and American flag mounted by the front door. "It's not much compared to what you're used to, I imagine." "On the contrary," Elon replied, observing the well-tended property. "There's something authentic here. Real lives being lived, not just spaces designed to impress others." As they approached the front gate, Eleanor noticed her neighbor Patricia Morgan peering through her curtains across the street. At 75, Patricia had appointed herself the unofficial neighborhood watchdog, her curiosity often manifesting as well-intentioned but persistent nosiness. "We're about to become the talk of the street," Eleanor chuckled. "Patricia's probably already texting the entire neighborhood association." Elon smiled, but seemed unbothered. "Some things are universal, aren't they? Every community has its communication network." At Eleanor's front door, she hesitated before inviting him inside. "I'd offer you that cup of tea I mentioned, but I suspect you have more important matters waiting." Elon checked his phone, where multiple messages from his assistant had accumulated. "Unfortunately, you're right. I have a conference call in 30 minutes that can't be rescheduled." He passed the grocery bags to Eleanor, making sure she had a secure grip. "But I'd like to take a rain check if the offer still stands." "Of course," Eleanor replied, surprised by his sincerity, "though I doubt you'll actually find the time in your schedule for tea with an old librarian." Something shifted in Elon's expression, a momentary vulnerability breaking through his public persona. "Mrs. Wilson, I've learned that we make time for what matters, and sometimes the most valuable connections happen outside our carefully plotted paths." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Well then, my door is open whenever you find yourself in need of honest conversation and a proper cup of tea." Almost impulsively, Elon pulled out a business card and scribbled something on the back. "My private number," he explained, handing it to her. "Not something I share widely. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate." Eleanor accepted the card with a raised eyebrow. "That's extraordinarily kind, but I can't imagine a scenario where I'd need to interrupt Elon Musk's day." "Life has a way of surprising us," he replied. "Just promise you'll use it if necessary." "Very well," Eleanor agreed, tucking the card into her cardigan pocket. "Though the same goes for you. Sometimes a quiet conversation away from the spotlight can clear the mind wonderfully." As they said their goodbyes, neither noticed the small crowd that had gathered at a respectful distance, neighbors and passers-by discreetly observing the unusual scene. Several smartphones had captured photos and short videos of their interaction, documentation already beginning its journey across social media platforms. Elon's security detail, which had maintained a discreet distance throughout the grocery store encounter, now approached in an unmarked vehicle. With a final wave to Eleanor, he departed, leaving her standing on her front porch with an expression of bemused wonderment. Inside her home, Eleanor carefully unpacked her groceries, replaying the unexpected encounter in her mind. The beef broth, the catalyst for their meeting, she placed in her pantry with a small smile. As she began preparing vegetables for her stew, her phone rang with a familiar tone. "Hello, Catherine," she answered, knowing her daughter's scheduled Wednesday check-in call. "Mom," Catherine's voice held an unusual urgency. "Is it true? Mrs. Abernathy just called saying you were escorted home by Elon Musk of all people." I told her she must be confused. Eleanor chuckled. For once, the neighborhood grapevine has it right, though escorted makes it sound far more dramatic than a simple act of kindness. There was a moment of stunned silence before Catherine replied, "You're serious? How on earth did this happen? I nearly fell trying to reach something at Westridge Market, and he happened to be there at the right moment. Then he insisted on carrying my groceries home. Quite an ordinary interaction, really, despite who he is." "Ordinary? Mom, nothing about this is ordinary. Elon Musk doesn't just wander around helping random people with their shopping." Eleanor continued chopping carrots, phone tucked between ear and shoulder. "Well, today he did. He's actually quite thoughtful in person. Listened more than he spoke, which is rare these days. I don't even know what to say," Catherine stammered. "Michael will never believe this. His tech friends worship the ground that man walks on." "Perhaps you could remind your husband that even celebrated innovators put their pants on one leg at a time," Eleanor replied dryly. "Though I will say, there's something compelling about him, a complexity beneath the public image." "Mom, you're trending on Twitter," Catherine suddenly interrupted, her voice rising in disbelief. "Elon and Eleanor is actually gaining traction. Someone posted a video from the grocery store. You can see him helping you with that cane and then walking out together." Eleanor stopped chopping. "What nonsense is this? Why would anyone care about such a trivial interaction?" "Because people are desperate for good news," Catherine explained. "A tech billionaire showing genuine kindness to an elderly woman without cameras or PR teams orchestrating it. That's social media gold, Mom." Eleanor sighed deeply. "Well, that's rather absurd, but I suppose it will blow over by tomorrow when some celebrity wears an outrageous outfit or says something controversial." But even as she dismissed the notion, Eleanor felt a twinge of uneasiness. Her life had been deliberately private since Robert's death, quiet, dignified, and largely unremarkable to anyone outside her immediate circle. The idea of becoming even momentarily viral felt invasive and disorienting. Across town, Elon was experiencing his own version of this unexpected aftermath. His communications team had already compiled a brief on the spreading social media narrative, noting the overwhelmingly positive sentiment surrounding what witnesses were calling his genuine moment of humanity. "We're getting media requests for and comment," his PR director informed him during their scheduled call. "This could be excellent timing with the congressional hearings next month. Shows a more relatable side that counters some of the criticism about being disconnected from ordinary people's concerns." Elon frowned, scrolling through the report on his tablet. I'm not interested in leveraging a simple interaction for PR purposes. Just respond with no comment to any inquiries. With respect, sir, that's not the wisest approach. This is organic positive press, the kind we can't manufacture. We should at least... The answer is no, Elon interrupted firmly. Mrs. Wilson isn't a prop for improving my public image. The interaction was private and should remain so. After ending the call, Elon found himself staring out the window of his temporary Palo Alto residence, troubled by how quickly a genuine human connection had been commodified into a potential PR asset. The calculated response from his team, though professionally appropriate, highlighted exactly why such authentic moments had become increasingly rare in his life. Eleanor Wilson's straightforward manner and unpretentious wisdom had provided a refreshing contrast to the carefully curated interactions that dominated his daily experience. Their brief conversation had reminded him of his grandmother, a practical, resilient woman who had valued actions over words and character over accomplishment. Almost without conscious thought, Elon reached for his personal phone and began composing a text message to the number he'd saved earlier. Mrs. Wilson, I hope you've had a peaceful afternoon. I wanted to apologize for any unwanted attention our meeting may have brought to your doorstep. If there's anything I can do to help manage this unexpected spotlight, please let me know. Elon back at her kitchen table, Eleanor was experiencing the disorienting sensation of sudden, unwanted fame. Her phone had not stopped ringing, old friends, distant relatives, and even former colleagues, all calling to confirm the story, spreading across social platforms. Catherine had sent links to several news websites already running the story, with headlines like Tech Titan's touching gesture to octogenarian goes viral, and Musk's market miracle billion-dollar heart revealed. Eleanor had stopped answering, her phone overwhelmed by the attention. As she finally sat down with a cup of tea, her phone buzzed with a text notification. Reading Elon's message brought an unexpected sense of relief. Here was someone who understood exactly how intrusive this spotlight felt. Her fingers moved slowly but deliberately across the screen as she composed her reply. Dear Mr. Musk, thank you for your kind message. It seems we've both been caught in this strange storm of public fascination. Perhaps this is the universe suggesting we should have that cup of tea sooner rather than later. My garden is private and peaceful, if you need a brief respite from the world's eyes. Eleanor Wilson. The exchange of messages marked a turning point neither could have anticipated, the beginning of a connection that would soon transcend their chance meeting and impact not only their lives, but ripple outward in ways neither could imagine. The following afternoon found Eleanor sitting in her sunlit garden, arranging a tray with her best porcelain teacups, wedding gifts from 1962 that had survived decades of family gatherings and quiet, solitary evenings. She'd received a brief text from Elon accepting her invitation, mentioning he could spare an hour between meetings. The message had struck her as both surprising and somehow inevitable. The garden offered natural privacy, sheltered by mature rose bushes and a towering oak that had been a sapling when she and Robert first moved in. Eleanor had maintained this space meticulously over the years, finding therapy in the rhythm of seasonal plantings and the satisfaction of nurturing living things. Though autumn had begun to paint the leaves in amber and gold, late-blooming dahlias and chrysanthemums still provided vibrant splashes of color. Just us today, she murmured to Maurice, her ginger cat who lounged lazily on a wrought-iron chair, tail swishing occasionally at passing insects. For the 20th time that hour, Eleanor checked her phone. The online attention had not diminished, as she'd hoped, but had instead evolved into something more substantial. Morning shows were discussing the heartwarming encounter, and opinion pieces were analyzing what the interaction revealed about wealth, aging, and human connection in the digital age. Several journalists had left voicemails requesting interviews, which Eleanor had promptly deleted. The doorbell chimed at precisely 3 o'clock. Eleanor smoothed her cardigan and made her way through the house, pausing briefly to check her appearance. In the hallway mirror, a habit ingrained through decades of teaching children the importance of presentation. She found herself hoping she looked dignified rather than just old. Opening the front door revealed Elon standing on her porch, more formally dressed than yesterday in dark slacks and a button-down shirt, holding a small gift bag. A sleek black car waited at the curb, its driver maintaining a discreet distance. "Mr. Musk," Eleanor greeted him with a small nod. "Please, just Elon," he replied, the faintest hint of his South African accent surfacing, as it often did in less guarded moments. "Then you must call me Eleanor," she countered, stepping aside to welcome him in. "Not Mrs. Wilson, which makes me feel like I'm still supervising the school library." As Eleanor led him through her modest home, she was acutely aware of the contrast between her world and his. The furniture showed the gentle wear of decades. Family photographs lined every available surface, and bookshelves overflowed with well-read volumes organized not by appearance, but by frequency of use. Nothing was for show. Everything served a purpose, or held a memory. "I brought you something," Elon said when they reached the garden, extending the gift bag. "A small token of appreciation for your hospitality." Eleanor accepted it with gracious curiosity, reaching inside to find an elegant wooden box containing an assortment of premium teas from around the world. "These are sourced from family-owned tea gardens," Elon explained, "places where traditional methods have been preserved despite pressure to industrialize. I thought you might appreciate craftsmanship that values quality over efficiency." Eleanor opened the box, inhaling the complex aromatics. "How thoughtful, and quite perceptive. I've always believed some processes shouldn't be rushed or disrupted. As your industry likes to say, some of my colleagues would consider that heresy," Elon replied with a wry smile as they settled into the garden chairs. "Questioning orthodoxy is hardly new territory for you, from what I've read," Eleanor observed, pouring steaming water over the tea leaves she'd already prepared, her own special blend of Earl Grey with a hint of lavender. For the next 45 minutes, they engaged in conversation that drifted naturally between personal reflections and broader philosophical questions. Eleanor shared stories of watching the first moon landing on a small black-and-white television, while Elon described the moment he'd first conceptualized reusable rockets. Despite the vast differences in their life experiences, there was a surprising resonance in their perspectives on human potential and responsibility. "The hardest lesson I've learned," Eleanor said as she refilled their cups, "is that progress isn't always linear. We gain ground in some areas while losing it in others. When I was your age, I imagined the future would solve all our problems. Now I understand that solutions often create new challenges we couldn't have anticipated." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "That's precisely what keeps me awake at night. Every technological advancement creates ripple effects we can't fully predict. The weight of those unintended consequences." He trailed off, staring into the garden. "Is that why you stepped in yesterday?" Eleanor asked gently. "A small action with predictable immediate good to balance the larger uncertainties." The question seemed to catch Elon off guard. He considered it carefully before responding. "I hadn't thought of it that way, but perhaps you're right. There's something clarifying about direct human connection. No algorithms, no market projections, just one person helping another." Their conversation was interrupted by the chiming of Elon's phone. He glanced at it apologetically. "My next meeting starts in 20 minutes. "Of course," Eleanor acknowledged, beginning to gather the teacups. "I appreciate you making time for an old woman's company." "I should be thanking you," Elon replied, his usual intensity softened. "This has been restorative. A reminder of why the work matters beyond shareholders and quarterly reports." As they walked back through the house, Eleanor noticed Elon pausing at her bookshelf, examining the well-worn spine of Asimov's Foundation series. "A favorite of yours?" she inquired, Foundational to my thinking, he admitted. The concept of using mathematics to predict human behavior and guide civilization through inevitable crises. It's both compelling and cautionary. Fiction often becomes our blueprint for the future, Eleanor observed. Though I've always found Asimov's characters somewhat lacking in emotional intelligence compared to his brilliant concepts. Elon laughed unexpectedly. A valid criticism I hadn't considered. Perhaps that's why some of our most sophisticated technologies struggle with human nuance. At the front door, their parting held a warmth that suggested this wouldn't be there. Last conversation. Thank you for the tea and perspective, Eleanor. Both were exactly what I needed. My door remains open whenever the world becomes too noisy, she replied. Sometimes the best solutions emerge from quiet reflection. As Elon's car pulled away, Eleanor noticed Patricia Morgan watching from her front yard, ostensibly pruning roses that needed no attention. Eleanor waved cheerfully, knowing the neighborhood information network would be activated within minutes. Inside, Eleanor was surprised to find herself feeling energized rather than drained by the social interaction. There had been something validating about having her lifetime of wisdom taken seriously by someone at the forefront of shaping the future. In a culture that often rendered the elderly invisible, the genuine exchange of ideas had reaffirmed her continuing relevance in a rapidly changing world. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Mom, you won't believe this. Michael's company just got an email requesting him specifically for a project at Tesla, something about engineering expertise for senior-friendly interfaces. This can't be a coincidence." Eleanor stared at the message, connecting the dots to a brief mention she'd made during tea about her son-in-law's work in accessibility design. Had Elon actually acted on that passing comment? The possibility was both touching and slightly unsettling, a reminder of the influence he wielded with a single directive. Before she could respond to Catherine, Eleanor's doorbell rang again. This time, she opened it to find a local television reporter and cameraman on her porch. "Mrs. Wilson, Diane Chen from KGO TV. We're hoping to get your perspective on your viral moment with Elon Musk. Viewers are calling it the feel-good story of the year. How a simple act of kindness is reminding Silicon Valley of its humanity." Eleanor's expression shifted from surprise to firm resolve. "I appreciate your interest, but I'm afraid I have no comment. What happened was a private interaction between two people, not a public spectacle." The reporter pressed forward. "But wouldn't you agree that in these divided times, stories like yours remind us of our shared humanity? Don't you think the public deserves—" "What the public deserves," Eleanor interrupted firmly, "is to remember that genuine human connections aren't performance art. Now, if you'll excuse me, my cat needs feeding." She closed the door gently, but definitively, leaning against it as her heart raced with unaccustomed adrenaline. The confrontation, minor as it was, had shaken her. Eleanor had always valued her privacy and the quiet dignity of her routine life. This unexpected spotlight felt invasive and misrepresentative of what had actually transpired. With slightly trembling hands, Eleanor sent a text to Elon. "It seems my 15 minutes of fame aren't quite over. Just turned away a TV crew from my front door. Is this what your daily life is like?" His reply came surprisingly quickly. "Unfortunately, yes. Sometimes worse. I'm sorry you're experiencing this. Would you like me to have someone handle it?" Eleanor considered the offer, tempted briefly by the prospect of professional intervention to restore her privacy. But something in her independent spirit rebelled against the idea. "No, thank you," she replied. "I may be old, but I can still manage my own affairs. Just needed to vent to someone who understands the absurdity." Later that evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a notification. Catherine had sent a link to a social media post that was rapidly gaining attention. Someone had captured Eleanor's exchange with the reporter through a car window and shared it online with the caption, "Elon's elderly friend shutting down media vultures like a boss, Protect this woman at all costs. Bus Eleanor Wisdom. Jack's privacy matters. The comment section overflowed with support. Finally, someone standing up to exploitation disguised as human interest. Eleanor for press secretary. No nonsense, just facts. This is the energy I want to have when I'm her age. Eleanor set down her phone with a mixture of amusement and dismay. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her stand for privacy had itself become public content consumed and commented upon by thousands of strangers. The boundary between personal experience and public narrative had never seemed so permeable. Meanwhile, across town, Elon sat in his home office, reviewing the same viral content. He'd instructed his team to monitor the situation, concerned about the impact on Eleanor's well-being. The latest social media trends showed their narrative evolving beyond their initial encounter to focus on Eleanor herself, with hashtags like "Let's be more Eleanor" and "Eleanor Energy," celebrating her dignified boundaries. For someone accustomed to the relentless machinery of public opinion, Elon found himself unusually invested in protecting Eleanor from its potentially grinding gears. He understood better than most how quickly admiration could transform into entitlement, with the public demanding increasingly personal access and emotional labor from those who briefly captured their attention. After some deliberation, Elon composed an email to his communications team. Eleanor Wilson. Situation: I want absolutely no corporate leveraging of my interaction with Mrs. Wilson or her subsequent media attention. No social media posts from company accounts. No references. In interviews, nothing. This is not a marketing opportunity. Additionally, please prepare a brief statement that neither confirms nor denies any details, but respectfully asks for Mrs. Wilson's privacy to be respected. Have legal review before releasing. On a separate note, I've added Michael Chen to the UI accessibility project for the new Model S interface. This is based on merit and relevant experience. Make sure his onboarding reflects that. No special treatment or mentions of family connections. After sending the email, Elon found himself reflecting on Eleanor's parting words about quiet reflection. Against his usual instincts, he closed his laptop, silenced his phone, and stepped out onto his private terrace. The night sky above Palo Alto was partially obscured by light pollution, but a few persistent stars still shone through. For the first time in what felt like months, he allowed himself to simply exist, without immediately productive purpose. The mental space created in that moment offered unexpected clarity about several problems that had been troubling him. Not through active problem-solving, but through the perspective that comes with momentary detachment. Eleanor's voice seemed to echo in his mind. Sometimes the most valuable path forward becomes visible only when we stop charging ahead. The next morning brought unexpected developments for Eleanor. She awoke to find several bouquets delivered to her porch, not from Elon, as she momentarily suspected, but from neighbors and community members expressing their support and admiration for her stance against media intrusion. More surprisingly, her email inbox contained a message from the director of the Palo Alto Senior Center, where she occasionally volunteered. Dear Eleanor, in light of your recent public attention, which I know was unintended, we've received an anonymous donation of $50,000, earmarked specifically for our technology literacy program for seniors. The donor cited your dignified example of intergenerational connection as inspiration. While I cannot confirm the source, the timing seems more than coincidental. The funds will allow us to replace our outdated computers and expand the program to reach homebound seniors through new outreach initiatives. Would you be willing to help us shape this expanded program? Your perspective on bridging technological divides while maintaining human connection would be invaluable. Warmly, Margaret Chen, Director, Palo Alto Senior Center. Eleanor read the email twice, her mind working through the implications. She had mentioned the technology program to Elon during their conversation, lamenting how many seniors became increasingly isolated as essential services moved online without consideration for their needs or learning curves. If Elon was indeed the anonymous donor, he had respected her values by directing resources to community infrastructure rather than making a personal gift that might have felt uncomfortable. The approach showed a nuanced understanding of her character that Eleanor found both perceptive and touching. With a decisive nod to herself, Eleanor began composing her reply, accepting the invitation to help shape the program. Perhaps there was a purpose to this unexpected spotlight after all. Not fame or personal gain, but the opportunity to channel attention toward meaningful community needs that might otherwise remain invisible. As she typed, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of purpose flowing through her. The chance meeting at Westridge Market was evolving into something neither she nor Elon could have anticipated, a catalyst for connection that extended far beyond their individual interaction. Over the next 3 weeks, the initial media frenzy surrounding Eleanor and Elon's encounter gradually subsided, though it left a transformed landscape in its wake. Eleanor found herself navigating a delicate balance between her desire for privacy and the unexpected platform she'd been given to advocate for issues she cared deeply about. The expanded technology program at the Palo Alto Senior Center had become her primary focus, consuming afternoons previously spent on crossword puzzles and gardening. Working alongside volunteers, many of whom were young tech professionals seeking meaningful community engagement, Eleanor helped design curricula that addressed seniors' practical needs while honoring their dignity and life experience. Remember, she instructed a group of enthusiastic Stanford computer science students during an orientation session. The goal isn't to teach them to think like you, it's to make technology adapt to how they already think. They've spent decades developing problem-solving approaches that work for them. The young volunteers nodded earnestly, taking notes on sleek tablets as Eleanor continued. And for heaven's sake, don't use phrases like "it's so intuitive" or "it's really simple." Nothing undermines confidence faster than being told something should be easy when it isn't for you. Among the volunteers sat Priya Sharma, a brilliant UI designer from Tesla who had been assigned to observe the program as part of Michael Chen's accessibility project. She raised her hand tentatively. "Mrs. Wilson, we're designing interfaces that need to work for everyone from teenagers to people in their 90s. How do we balance simplicity with functionality across such diverse user groups?" Eleanor considered the question thoughtfully. The best tools don't force you to notice them. Think about a well-designed door handle. It works the same whether you're 7 or 70 without requiring instructions. Digital interfaces should aspire to that invisibility. After the session, Priya approached Eleanor privately. "Mr. Musk specifically asked for notes from these sessions," she confided. "He's taking a personal interest in this project." Eleanor maintained a neutral expression, though the news didn't particularly surprise her. Their sporadic text exchange had continued, evolving into a kind of long-distance mentorship where technological vision met human wisdom, each respectfully challenging the other's perspectives. "Tell him I expect to see actual improvements, not just theoretical interest," Eleanor replied, with a hint of mischief. "And that user testing should include people with arthritis, using the touchscreen on cold mornings." That evening, Eleanor's quiet dinner was interrupted by a call from Catherine. "Mom, you need to see this," her daughter said without preamble. "Michael was at headquarters for a progress meeting today, and guess what was on the wall of Elon's private conference room?" "I couldn't possibly guess," Eleanor replied dryly, though a warmth spread through her chest at her daughter's obvious excitement. "A framed quote, Mom. It said, 'The best tools don't force you to notice them,' with your name underneath." Mikkel almost fell out of his chair when he saw it. Eleanor set down her fork, genuinely surprised. "Well, that's unexpected." Unexpected. It's extraordinary. Your words are literally shaping how they're approaching the next generation of interfaces. Michael says there's been a complete shift in how they're evaluating success metrics. Less about flashy features and more about invisible functionality. After finishing the call, Eleanor sat in her living room, Maurice purring contentedly on her lap as she processed this development. There was something profoundly validating about having her perspective taken seriously, not as an elder to be humored, but as a voice of valuable wisdom worth amplifying. Her phone chimed with a text from Elon. "Your quote is causing quite a stir among the design teams. Did I overstep by sharing it?" Eleanor smiled as she typed her reply. "Properly attributed wisdom belongs to whoever needs it. Though I must say, seeing my casual observations elevated to philosophical status is rather amusing." Elon's response came quickly. The most profound insights often sound simple in retrospect. That's how we know they're true. Conversation shifted to updates on their respective projects. Eleanor described the challenges of helping seniors overcome tech anxiety, while Elon shared frustrations with regulatory hurdles for autonomous driving features specifically designed to help older adults maintain independence. Their exchange was interrupted by breaking news notifications, simultaneously lighting up both their phones. A major earthquake had struck the California coastline, causing significant damage to infrastructure and widespread power outages. Though Palo Alto was spared the worst effects, the surrounding regions faced serious humanitarian challenges. Eleanor immediately thought of her friend Edith, who lived alone in a Santa Cruz mountain community likely to be isolated by road damage. Her attempts to call went straight to voicemail. Cell towers in the area were presumably affected. After 30 minutes of increasingly worried attempts to reach Edith or local authorities, Eleanor remembered the card still tucked in her cardigan pocket. With some hesitation, she called the private number Elon had given her. He answered immediately. "Eleanor, are you safe?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "But I have a friend in Boulder Creek who lives alone and uses oxygen supplementation. With the power outages." "Text me the address," Elon interrupted, his tone shifting to decisive action. "I'll have someone check on her immediately. Our emergency response team has backup generators and satellite communication equipment deploying to affected areas." Eleanor sent Edith's information, adding, "I wouldn't usually impose, but these are extraordinary circumstances. This is exactly why I gave you my number," came the swift reply. "Update soon." True to his word, less than 2 hours later, Eleanor received a text confirming that Edith was safe, her oxygen equipment connected to a portable power source, and supplies delivered to last several days. The message included a photo of Edith giving a thumbs up beside a Tesla-branded emergency response vehicle. Relief washed over Eleanor, followed by profound gratitude for the leverage Elon's resources provided in a crisis. While government emergency responses were still mobilizing, private action had already reached her vulnerable friend. The next morning, Eleanor was surprised by a knock at her door. She opened it to find a young woman in a Tesla uniform holding a tablet. "Mrs. Wilson? I'm Alex from Tesla Energy. Mr. Musk asked us to install a Powerwall system in your home as part of our emergency preparedness rollout program." Eleanor blinked in confusion. "A what system?" "It's a home battery that stores energy and provides backup power during outages," Alex explained enthusiastically. "The installation is completely covered by our Community Resilience Initiative." Eleanor's independence instincts immediately bristled. "I haven't agreed to any installation, and while I appreciate Mr. Musk's concern, I've managed quite well through previous power outages with flashlights and candles." Alex looked momentarily flustered before recovering her professional demeanor. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson, it's entirely optional. Mr. Musk simply prioritized certain community members based on—" She hesitated, clearly trying to find tactful wording. based on age and perceived vulnerability," Eleanor finished for her, a hint of steel entering her voice. "Please tell Mr. Musk that while I appreciate the thought, I prefer to be consulted rather than presumed fragile." After the Tesla representative departed, Eleanor fired off a text to Elon. While checking on Edith was appropriate given the emergency, sending installation teams to my home without discussion crosses a boundary. Good intentions don't override personal autonomy, something I suspect you value yourself. Elon's response came an hour later. "You're absolutely right. I overstepped and apologize." Emergency response mindset took over without considering how it might feel from your perspective. "No more uninvited assistance, I promise." Eleanor appreciated the direct acknowledgement without defensive justification. Their relationship had developed enough mutual respect that boundaries could be established without damaging the connection, a healthy dynamic that Eleanor had found increasingly rare in her interactions with both younger and older generations. The earthquake's aftermath revealed another dimension to their unlikely friendship. While Eleanor coordinated local senior center volunteers to check on vulnerable community members, Elon deployed technological resources where they could be most effective. Their complementary approaches, human connection paired with logistical capability, created an unexpectedly powerful response model. This collaborative dynamic caught the attention of the mayor's office, which was struggling to coordinate various relief efforts efficiently. A week after the earthquake, Eleanor found herself invited to an emergency management meeting alongside corporate leaders, non-profit directors, and government officials. As she entered the conference room at City Hall, Eleanor was immediately aware of being the oldest person present by at least 2 decades. Several attendees glanced at her with barely concealed confusion about her role there. Mayor Sanchez greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for joining us. Your grassroots coordination efforts have been remarkably effective." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened again, and Elon walked in, immediately commanding the room's attention through sheer recognition. His eyes found Eleanor, and he offered a small nod of acknowledgement before taking a seat across the table. The meeting progressed, with various stakeholders reporting on their efforts and challenges. When Eleanor's turn came, she spoke clearly and directly about the specific needs of isolated seniors and disabled community members who were falling through gaps in the official response. "Our volunteers are finding people who've been without their medications for days," she explained. "The official emergency communications aren't reaching those without smartphones or internet access. We need a parallel system using traditional channels." A tech company CEO scoffed lightly. "With respect, Mrs. Wilson, we're building for the future. Resources allocated to outdated communication methods like landline calls or radio announcements would be better invested in expanding digital infrastructure." Eleanor fixed him with the same steady gaze that had quelled generations of disruptive library patrons. "Young man, when your battery dies and cell towers are down, you'll understand why redundant systems matter. Innovation that abandons people rather than including them isn't progress. It's privileged myopia." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room until Elon unexpectedly chuckled. "She's right," he stated simply. "Our emergency response teams found exactly this problem. The most vulnerable populations were the least reachable through our initial digital-first approach. We've since adapted to include analog methods alongside digital ones." The meeting shifted after this exchange, with Eleanor's practical wisdom gaining new respect among the assembled leaders. When discussions concluded, several participants approached her to exchange contact information and discuss collaboration opportunities. As the room cleared, Elon made his way to Eleanor's side. "That was quite the masterclass in cutting through tech bubble thinking," he commented, eyes twinkling with appreciation. "Sometimes experience trumps innovation," Eleanor replied, "though I'm grateful for your support." They might have dismissed me as a nostalgic old woman without it. They'd have been fools to do so, but I understand the reality, Elon acknowledged. Though I suspect you'd have won them over regardless. You have a way of making wisdom impossible to ignore. Their conversation was interrupted by Mayor Sanchez approaching with an eager expression. Mr. Musk, Mrs. Wilson, I have a proposition for you both. The response coordination between your grassroots volunteers and Tesla's emergency teams has created an effective model we'd like to formalize. Formalize how? Eleanor asked cautiously. A community resilience task force, the mayor explained, bridging technology and human connection to ensure noon falls through the cracks during emergencies. We'd like both of you to serve as honorary co-chairs, lending your complementary perspectives to guide the initiative. Eleanor and Elon exchanged a glance that conveyed a shared understanding. Their chance encounter had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a partnership that balanced innovation with compassion, efficiency with humanity. I'd be honored, Eleanor replied, though my contribution would be advisory rather than operational at my age. Wisdom is an operational asset, Elon countered, before turning to the mayor. Tesla will support this initiative with resources and technology, provided the focus remains on serving the most vulnerable rather than generating publicity. As they departed City Hall together, Eleanor noticed media photographers discreetly capturing their exit. The narrative around their relationship had evolved from a viral moment of kindness to a substantive collaboration, bridging generational and technological divides. I never imagined becoming a public figure at 82. Eleanor remarked as they walked toward their respective vehicles. It seems life can surprise you at any age. That's what keeps it interesting, Elon replied. Though I suspect you've always had this impact on your community, just without the spotlight magnifying it. Eleanor considered this assessment thoughtfully. Perhaps, though there's something powerful about finding new purpose when society generally expects you to quietly fade away. Society's expectations are often tragically limited, Elon observed. Some of my most valuable mentors have been people whose conventional, productive years were supposedly behind them. Their conversation paused as they reached Eleanor's modest car, which stood in sharp contrast to the sleek Tesla waiting nearby, with a driver at attention. I've been meaning to ask, Elon said suddenly. What was the senior center like before the technology program expansion? I'm curious about the baseline we're improving from. Eleanor recognized the question as more than casual interest. It was Elon's methodical mind seeking quantifiable metrics for the impact of their efforts. Would you like to see for yourself? They're hosting a community dinner tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just volunteers and participants sharing a meal. You'd see the real people behind the data points. Elon hesitated visibly, his calendar undoubtedly packed with high-level meetings and global concerns, but something in Eleanor's invitation seemed to resonate with a deeper need. I'd like that, he decided. No media, no announcements, just observation and conversation. I'll text you the details, Eleanor promised as she unlocked her car door. And Elon, wear something casual. These folks are impressed by character, not net worth. As Eleanor drove home, she reflected on the unexpected trajectory her life had taken in recent weeks. What had begun as a simple moment of human connection in a grocery store had cascaded into community impact far beyond anything she could have orchestrated deliberately. The depth of her connection with Elon surprised her. Most of all, despite their vastly different lives, they'd developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and complementary perspectives. Eleanor provided the grounded wisdom of lived experience, while Elon contributed visionary thinking and practical resources. Together, they were creating something neither could have accomplished alone, a bridge between innovation and tradition, technology and humanity, youth and age. In a world increasingly divided by generational and technological gaps, their unlikely alliance represented a powerful alternative to the either-or thinking that dominated public discourse. As Eleanor pulled into her driveway, her phone chimed with a text from Catherine. "Mom, there's something you need to see on the news tonight. Call me after." The cryptic message left Eleanor with a vague sense of unease as she entered her home. Whatever was coming, she suspected it might test the foundation of this newly formed connection and perhaps reveal whether their friendship could withstand the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny that constantly surrounded Elon's life. Eleanor settled into her armchair that evening, television tuned to the local news as she prepared to discover what had prompted Catherine's cryptic message. Maurice curled at her feet, seeking warmth against the autumn chill that had descended over Palo Alto. The answer came during the business segment, when the anchor's expression turned serious. Breaking news tonight in the world of tech. Tesla shareholders have filed a lawsuit against CEO Elon Musk, claiming his recent earthquake relief efforts represent misappropriation of company resources for personal projects. The lawsuit specifically cites the Palo Alto Community Resilience Initiative as lacking sufficient connection to Tesla's core business objectives. The screen filled with footage of Eleanor and Elon leaving City Hall together, their body language suggesting comfortable familiarity. A financial analyst appeared, speculating about Elon's motivations. When executives developed projects based on personal relationships rather than business strategy, shareholders have legitimate cause for concern. Eleanor's phone rang almost immediately, Catherine calling as promised. "Mom, are you watching this? They're making it sound like you've somehow manipulated one of the world's richest men into spending millions on your community projects." "That's absurd," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the shock. "The initiative was the mayor's idea, and their sources Elon committed are entirely appropriate for emergency response." "I know that, but public perception is running wild. Social media is split between people calling you a masterful senior influencer and others suggesting you're being used as a PR prop." Catherine's voice conveyed both worry and indignation. "This isn't what you signed up for when you went grocery shopping 3 weeks ago." After assuring her daughter she was fine, Eleanor ended the call and sat in silence, processing this unexpected turn. Her relationship with Elon, something genuine and surprisingly meaningful, was being recast as either manipulation or exploitation. Depending on which cynical lens one viewed it through, her phone buzzed with a text from Elon. "I'm sure you've seen the news. Please know this lawsuit is without merit and will be resolved quickly. I'm sorry you've been dragged into corporate politics." Eleanor considered her response carefully before typing, "I'm more concerned about you than myself." "Will this cause serious problems?" "Nothing I haven't handled before," came his reply, "but I need to step back from public involvement with the initiative temporarily while legal handles this. The mayor understands." The subtext was clear. Their budding friendship needed to become less visible. Eleanor felt a surprising pang of disappointment, having come to value their exchanges and collaborative efforts. Still, she understood the pragmatic necessity. "I understand completely," she wrote back. "The work matters more than who gets credit for it." That night, Eleanor slept poorly, troubled by how quickly something positive could be twisted into controversy. The modern tendency to seek ulterior motives in every action, especially kind ones, struck her as a sad commentary on collective cynicism. Morning brought an unexpected visitor. Eleanor opened her door to find Priya Sharma, the Tesla designer, looking apologetic on her porch. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope I'm not intruding," Priya began. "I wanted to update you on the accessibility project personally, since the current situation has complicated official communications." Eleanor welcomed her in, offering tea as they settled in the living room. "I appreciate your visit, though I hope it doesn't create problems for you at work." Actually, Priya admitted, I'm here semi-officially. Mr. Musk wanted you to know that while he needs to maintain public distance temporarily, the senior technology initiatives will continue unchanged. She hesitated before adding, he also asked me to give you this. Priya handed Eleanor a small envelope containing a handwritten note, something so anachronistic in the digital age that its significance wasn't lost on Eleanor. I'll give you privacy. To read it, Priya said tactfully, focusing intently on her teacup. Eleanor carefully opened the envelope. Eleanor, some see our connection as either strategic or sentimental. They miss that it's valuable precisely because it's neither. It's authentic in a world where authenticity has become suspect. The lawyers advise distance for now. I've agreed publicly while disagreeing privately. Some bridges shouldn't be burned for temporary convenience. The senior center director has my private contact for any critical needs. The programs will continue funding through a foundation structure that separates them from Tesla corporate resources. This will pass. Truth has a resilience that outlasts speculation. With respect and appreciation, Elon P.S. The legal team would have a collective stroke knowing I put this in writing. Consider it proof of my commitment to what we've started. Eleanor folded the note carefully, touched by both its contents and the risk Elon had taken in sending it. In a world of calculated digital communications, a handwritten note represented vulnerability and trust. Thank you for bringing this, Priya, Eleanor said, tucking the note into her cardigan pocket. Now, tell me honestly, how are things at Tesla? Are people managing through this disruption? Priya's professional composure cracked slightly. It's tense. The lawsuit has created factions. Some executives think Mr. Musk should focus exclusively on shareholder value, while others, especially those involved in the emergency response, believe the community initiatives demonstrate our values and ultimately strengthen the brand. And where do you stand? Eleanor asked gently. I joined Tesla to build technology that helps people, not just to optimize profits, Priya replied, her voice gaining conviction. The accessibility features we're developing because of your input will make our vehicles usable for millions who've been excluded. That matters more than temporary stock fluctuations. Their conversation shifted to the technical progress of the accessibility projects, with Priya explaining how Eleanor's feedback had fundamentally reshaped their approach. What began as minor accommodations had evolved into universal design principles that improved user experience for everyone, regardless of age or ability. After Priya departed, Eleanor faced a decision. The sensible course would be to step back from public involvement herself, avoiding any actions that might complicate Elon's legal situation. Yet something about retreating felt wrong, as if surrendering to cynical interpretations of their motives. Eleanor made herself lunch while contemplating her options. As she ate, she watched a hummingbird darting among her garden flowers, remarkably resilient despite its apparent fragility. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. With sudden clarity, Eleanor reached for her phone and called Mayor Sanchez directly. I'd like to move forward with the Community Resilience Initiative, she stated when he answered, without Mr. Musk's involvement for now, but with the same objectives we discussed. I appreciate your commitment, Mrs. Wilson, the mayor replied, cautiously, but without Tesla's resources. We had community volunteers before Tesla, and we'll have them after. Eleanor interrupted firmly. What we need from your office is coordination and communication infrastructure. The human element has always been our strength. There was a thoughtful pause before the mayor responded. You know, my mother always said, the most powerful force in any community is determined older women who refuse to be sidelined. His tone warmed with respect. Let's meet tomorrow to restructure the approach. After hanging up, Eleanor texted the senior center director, we're proceeding with the Resilience Initiative independently for now. Please activate our volunteer network for a planning meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. already on it. The volunteers are more motivated than ever. They're calling it Eleanor's Brigade unofficially. The name made Eleanor chuckle despite herself. At 82, becoming the figurehead of a community action group hadn't been on her bingo card of likely life experiences. That evening, as Eleanor worked at her dining table drafting a volunteer coordination plan, her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Patricia Morgan, her perpetually nosy neighbor, standing on the porch with an uncharacteristically hesitant expression. "Eleanor, I hope I'm not interrupting," Patricia began. "I wanted to check if you're all right, with all this media nonsense swirling around." "I'm managing just fine," Eleanor assured her, somewhat surprised by the genuine concern. Patricia nodded, then thrust forward a folder she'd been clutching. "I thought you should see this. My son works for the Chronicle and mentioned they're investigating connections between Tesla shareholders filing the lawsuit and Competicar, that Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer trying to gain market share here." Eleanor accepted the folder, opening it to find printouts detailing financial connections between the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit against Elon and significant investments in Tesla's largest competitor. "This isn't just about corporate governance," Patricia continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "It's about undermining American innovation. They're specifically targeting the community initiative because it's generating positive publicity that their competitor can't match." Eleanor considered the documents thoughtfully. If accurate, they suggested the lawsuit was less about protecting shareholder interests and more about competitive sabotage, using legal mechanisms to hamstring a business rival while damaging a valuable community program in the process. "Thank you for bringing this to me, Patricia," Eleanor said sincerely. "This adds important context." After her neighbor departed, Eleanor studied the documents more carefully. While she had no direct way to help with Elon's legal troubles, this information suggested their community work had become collateral damage in a larger corporate battle, something that shifted her perspective from patient acceptance to strategic resistance. Eleanor reached for her phone, composing a careful text to Elon. "I've received information suggesting the lawsuit may involve competitive interests beyond standard shareholder concerns. I'll continue our work from the community side while you handle the corporate defense. Some bridges are worth protecting, even during storms." His reply came hours later, a simple, "This is why wisdom shouldn't be sidelined. Thank you, Eleanor." As she prepared for bed that night, Eleanor felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had begun as a chance encounter had evolved into a genuine mission, one worth defending against those who would cynically reframe it for their own purposes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she would face them with the resilience that had carried her through 8 decades of life's unexpected turns. The next 2 weeks unfolded with remarkable intensity for Eleanor. What had begun as a small volunteer initiative transformed into a community movement that the local press dubbed the Eleanor Effect. Senior citizens, tech workers, university students, and long-time residents rallied around the resilience program, creating an intergenerational coalition that addressed vulnerabilities exposed by the earthquake. Eleanor's dining room had become an impromptu command center, with color-coded maps identifying at-risk residents and coordination schedules for wellness checks. Her previously quiet home now buzzed with activity as volunteers dropped by for assignments and updates. "Mrs. Wilson, we've completed the medication delivery route for the mountain communities," reported Zach, a Stanford engineering student who had designed an efficient delivery algorithm for reaching isolated seniors. "And we've installed emergency call buttons in 27 homes without reliable phone service." Eleanor nodded approvingly, updating her master spreadsheet. At Catherine's insistence, she'd reluctantly upgraded from paper lists to a shared digital system, though she still maintained paper backups for when the power fails. "Excellent work, Zach. Are the call buttons the simplified model we discussed? 1 press for medical, 2 for supplies?" Yes, ma'am, and they connect directly to our volunteer dispatch center at the senior center, he confirmed. Simple, redundant, and effective, just like you specified. As Zach departed, Eleanor noticed a Tesla vehicle pulling up outside her home. Her heart skipped momentarily, wondering if Elon had decided to risk a visit despite the ongoing legal situation. Instead, Priya emerged from the passenger side, carrying what appeared to be technical equipment. "Mrs. Wilson?" Priya greeted her warmly at the door. "I'm here unofficially on my lunch break. We've developed prototype interfaces based on your feedback, and I was hoping to get your evaluation before we proceed with production models." Eleanor welcomed her in, noting the careful phrasing of unofficially that maintained the necessary public separation between Tesla's operations and the community initiative. The corporate attorneys might insist on distance, but the actual work continued through these informal channels. As they reviewed the prototypes, emergency communication devices with intuitive interfaces designed for users with limited dexterity or vision impairments, Eleanor marveled at how quickly her suggestions had been implemented into functional technology. "These are remarkable improvements, Priya," she acknowledged, testing a simplified touch panel. "The raised edges around buttons will make an enormous difference for those with reduced tactile sensitivity." "Your input has been invaluable," Priya admitted. "The engineering team kept trying to add features, but I kept returning to your core principle. The best tools don't force you to notice them." A knock at the open door interrupted their conversation. Eleanor looked up to see Catherine standing in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, eyeing Priya uncertainly. After Priya departed with the prototypes and promises to incorporate Eleanor's latest feedback, Catherine revealed their reason for her unexpected visit. "The shareholders' legal team wants to depose you," she stated bluntly, placing legal documents on the dining table. "They're claiming you have relevant information about Elon Musk's decision-making process regarding company resources." Eleanor examined the subpoena with calm detachment. "I suspected something like this might happen. They're looking for evidence that his community investments were personally rather than strategically motivated." "This is ridiculous," Catherine fumed. "You've been dragged into a corporate power struggle simply for accepting help with groceries." "Perhaps," Eleanor replied thoughtfully, "or perhaps I've been given an opportunity to stand up for something worthwhile." She folded the document neatly. "I should speak with a lawyer before responding." "Already handled," Catherine assured her. "Michael's college roommate specializes in corporate law. He's agreed to represent you pro bono. Says it's the least he can do after what you've done for the community." The following morning brought another unexpected development. Eleanor opened her front door to collect the newspaper and found a small package on her doorstep. A sleek smartphone with a note attached, "Secure communication device. Unhackable and untraceable. Only I have the companion. For emergencies or when wisdom is needed. Simple interface, extended battery life." Eleanor smiled at the thoughtfulness behind the gift. Not just the security features, but the enlarged buttons and high-contrast display, clearly designed with older users in mind. She powered it on and found a single pre-programmed contact. "Troublemaker," device received, she texted. Appropriate contact name, though unclear which of us it refers to. The response came immediately. "Definitely me. You're just the voice of reason I occasionally listen to." Later that afternoon, Eleanor met with her attorney James Chen to prepare for the upcoming deposition. In his mid-40s with prematurely graying hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses, James projected both competence and compassion. "Mrs. Wilson, the plaintiffs, are on a fishing expedition," he explained after reviewing the subpoena. "They're hoping you'll say something that suggests Mr. Musk diverted company resources based on personal connection rather than business judgment." "And if that were partially true?" Eleanor asked candidly. Our friendship did develop alongside the community initiatives. James nodded appreciatively at her honesty. The legal standard isn't whether personal rapport exists, but whether business decisions were made in good faith with reasonable belief in their benefit to the company. Tesla's emergency response program predates your meeting Mr. Musk, and community goodwill demonstrably benefits their brand value. So I simply tell the truth, Eleanor concluded. Yes, but carefully, James advised. Answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer additional information, and remember that I don't recall specifically is a perfectly acceptable answer when appropriate. Eleanor spent the remainder of the day reviewing documents related to the community initiative, wanting to ensure her testimony would be accurate and substantive. The responsibility weighed heavily, not for herself, but for the valuable work that might be jeopardized if the lawsuit succeeded. That evening, a breaking news alert interrupted Eleanor's preparation. She turned up the volume on her television. As the anchor reported, exclusive documents obtained by this station reveal potential corporate espionage behind the Tesla shareholder lawsuit. Financial records show the lead plaintiff recently established significant positions in Competicar, Tesla's main electric vehicle competitor in the Asian market. Eleanor recognized the information as similar to what Patricia had shared, though presented with additional supporting evidence. The report continued, detailing suspicious timing between Competicar announcements and legal actions against Tesla. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Elon. The truth emerges. Your neighbors. Documents proved correct. Expanded investigation revealed coordinated attack. Legal team moving to dismiss lawsuit tomorrow. You may still need to be deposed, but the context has shifted dramatically. Glad to hear it, Eleanor replied. Though I admit I was rather looking forward to giving those lawyers a piece of my mind. That opportunity may still come, Elon responded, but on much more favorable terms. The next morning's headline in the business section read, Tesla countersues shareholders, alleges market manipulation and corporate espionage. Financial analysts were already speculating about the implications, with most suggesting the original lawsuit would likely be withdrawn in light of the damaging counterclaims. Eleanor had just finished reading the article when her secure phone chimed with an unexpected message from Elon. Critical situation developing. Need your perspective urgently. Can you come to HQ? We'll send car. The message's terse nature concerned Eleanor. During their weeks of communication, Elon had never requested her physical presence at Tesla, mindful of both her mobility limitations and the optics of their connection. Of course. When? She responded immediately. Car arriving in 30 minutes. Thank you, Eleanor. Eleanor moved with purposeful efficiency, changing into a simple but dignified outfit suitable for a corporate headquarters visit. Her navy dress with a pearl necklace Robert had given her for their 40th anniversary. Whatever crisis had prompted this summons clearly required her to be prepared for formal settings. Precisely 30 minutes later, a Tesla Model X pulled up to her home. The driver, a security professional in business attire, greeted her respectfully. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Carlos. Mr. Musk asked me to escort you personally. There's water and refreshments in the vehicle if you need anything during the drive. The drive to Tesla headquarters took 20 minutes, during which Eleanor gathered her thoughts. The sudden urgency suggested something beyond the lawsuit, perhaps a critical decision about the community programs or accessibility features she'd helped influence. Upon arrival, Carlos escorted her through a private entrance, bypassing the main reception area. To avoid unnecessary attention, he explained, as they took a dedicated elevator to the executive floor. Eleanor was led not to Elon's office as expected, but to a large conference room where a tense scene was unfolding. Around the polished table sat Tesla's executive leadership team, looking variously concerned, frustrated, or resigned. At the head of the table stood Elon, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with an older man Eleanor didn't recognize. Conversation ceased as she entered, all eyes turning toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. Elon immediately crossed the room to greet her. "Eleanor, thank you for coming on such short notice." He guided her to a seat at the table, then made introductions. "Everyone, this is Eleanor Wilson. Eleanor, you're meeting Tesla's senior leadership, and," he gestured to the older man, "Harold Griffith, our largest individual shareholder outside myself." Harold Griffith, a man perhaps in his 70s with steel-grey hair and an expensive suit, regarded Eleanor with undisguised assessment. "So you're the famous Mrs. Wilson. Your influence has certainly been felt in our recent corporate direction." His tone carried an implication that made Eleanor straighten her posture imperceptibly, a gesture familiar to anyone who had ever tested her boundaries as a librarian. "I believe influence is earned, not imposed, Mr. Griffith. If my perspective has been valuable to Mr. Musk or Tesla, it speaks to their wisdom in seeking diverse viewpoints rather than any special power on my part." A flicker of surprised respect crossed Griffith's face before he continued. "Nevertheless, we find ourselves at a crossroads regarding the future of Tesla's community engagement programs. The board is divided on whether to continue these initiatives given recent controversies." Elon interjected, his frustration evident. "The programs demonstrate clear brand value and community goodwill. Abandoning them now would be both a moral failure and a strategic error. The fiduciary responsibility of this company is to shareholders, not community sentiment," Griffith countered sharply. "These programs represent significant resource allocation that could be directed toward production, optimization, or research." Eleanor observed the room dynamics carefully before speaking. "May I ask, Mr. Griffith, why I've been invited to this discussion? I'm neither a shareholder nor a Tesla employee." "Excellent question," Griffith replied. "Mr. Musk insisted your perspective was essential before final decisions are made. As the catalyst for much of this situation, he believes you've earned a voice in its resolution." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully, aware that every person in the room was evaluating her response. The next few minutes might well determine the fate of initiatives that had already improved hundreds of lives in her community. The weight of responsibility settled across her shoulders, familiar and heavy, yet somehow energizing. Throughout her life, Eleanor had often found herself in positions of unexpected advocacy, from library funding battles to senior housing initiatives. Once again, she was being called to articulate values that transcended immediate financial calculations. As she prepared to address the room, Eleanor felt a surprising sense of gratitude for the chance meeting at Westridge Market that had led to this moment. Sometimes the most consequential paths in life began with the simplest acts of human connection. Eleanor took a measured breath, surveying the expectant faces around the conference table. These were individuals accustomed to discussions of market share and profit margins, not the human impact of corporate decisions. But that human element was precisely what she brought to this table. "Mr. Griffith," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I understand your concern about fiduciary responsibility, its valid perspective. But I'd like to suggest that the traditional metrics by which we evaluate return on investment may be insufficient for the challenges facing businesses today." She folded her hands deliberately on the polished table surface. "In my 82 years, I've witnessed countless companies rise and fall. The ones that endure aren't just those with the strongest quarterly earnings, but those that successfully adapt to changing social contexts and establish genuine trust with their communities." Griffith leaned back, his expression guarded but attentive. "That's a lovely sentiment, Mrs. Wilson, but sentiment doesn't satisfy investor expectations. Perhaps not immediately," Eleanor acknowledged. "But may I ask, what is Tesla's mission statement?" The question caught several executives off guard, but Elon responded without hesitation: to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. A noble purpose, Eleanor noted, and one that inherently requires public trust and community engagement. The programs we've developed in Palo Alto aren't peripheral to that mission. They're essential demonstrations of what sustainable infrastructure actually means in people's lives. She turned to address the entire room now. During the earthquake recovery, Tesla Technologies provided power to medical equipment that kept vulnerable people alive. Your emergency response teams reached isolated communities before government resources could mobilize. These aren't charitable sidelines. They're living proof that your solutions work when traditional systems fail. The CFO, a woman in her 40s with a pragmatic demeanor, interjected, "Mrs. Wilson, while these outcomes are admirable, we still need to justify the expenditure to our shareholders. The programs represent a significant allocation of resources." Eleanor nodded respectfully. "I appreciate that perspective. So let's talk about value in terms investors understand. What's the customer acquisition cost for Tesla currently?" The unexpected question created a moment of surprised silence before the marketing director responded, "Approximately $700, $800 per customer, depending on the model and market." "And what's the lifetime value of a Tesla customer?" Eleanor continued. "Considering vehicle purchases, energy products, and brand loyalty effects, approximately $250,000 over 15 years, he replied, growing interested in where she was leading. The Community Resilience Program has directly touched over 5,000 households in the Palo Alto region, Eleanor stated. "According to your own customer data, what percentage of those households have initiated purchase inquiries for Tesla products since the earthquake response?" The data analytics executive consulted his tablet briefly. 17%, which is significantly above our normal conversion rate from community outreach. Eleanor allowed a small smile. "So the program has already generated potential customer acquisition at a lower cost than your traditional marketing channels, while simultaneously creating immeasurable goodwill and positive media coverage during a crisis that could have damaged public perception of tech companies as disconnected from real community needs." She turned to face Griffith directly. "That sounds like responsible financial stewardship to me, not a diversion from it." The room had grown noticeably still, executives exchanging thoughtful glances as Eleanor's framing shifted their perspective. Even Griffith seemed to be reassessing, his initial skepticism giving way to calculated consideration. "You make compelling points about short-term metrics," he conceded. "But my concern extends to precedent. If Tesla diverts focus to community initiatives beyond its core business model, we risk mission drift that could undermine long-term performance." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "A legitimate concern, but consider the alternative risk. A company so narrowly focused on traditional metrics that it fails to adapt to changing social expectations. The younger generations, who represent your future customer base, increasingly expect corporations to demonstrate genuine social responsibility." She gestured toward Elon. Mr. Musk understood this when he structured the emergency response programs, not as charity, but as real-world demonstrations of Tesla's core technologies in crisis conditions. The feedback from these deployments has already informed product improvements, hasn't it? Elon nodded, building on her point. "The battery systems we deployed post-earthquake revealed several optimization opportunities we've already incorporated into the next-generation Powerwall. The community deployment essentially functioned as advanced field testing under extreme conditions." The Chief Technology Officer leaned forward with newfound interest. "The data from emergency deployments did accelerate several development timelines. The variable load patterns in crisis scenarios revealed battery management improvements we might not have identified for another product cycle." A thoughtful silence settled over the room as the executives absorbed this reframing of community investment as strategic development rather than charitable diversion. Eleanor spoke into this moment of reconsideration. "Mr. Griffith, when you've achieved your level of success, legacy becomes an important consideration. The question isn't just what return a company generates for shareholders today, but what lasting impact it creates for future generations." Her voice took on a more personal tone. "I won't be here to see the world 50 years from now, but my grandchildren will." The work Tesla and this community initiative are doing together isn't just about earthquake recovery. It's about demonstrating how technology and human needs can align rather than conflict. That's the kind of corporate leadership that builds multi-generational loyalty no marketing budget can buy. Griffith studied Eleanor with newfound respect. "You're quite the advocate, Mrs. Wilson. I can see why Elon values your perspective." He turned to address the room. "Let's approach this pragmatically. I propose we continue the community programs, but with established metrics for evaluating their business impact, customer acquisition costs, product development insights, and brand sentiment analysis." "That seems reasonable," Eleanor agreed. "Responsible stewardship requires measurable outcomes, but I would suggest adding metrics that capture human impact as well. Lives improved or protected, vulnerable populations served, community resilience enhanced. These factors translate to brand trust, which ultimately drives long-term value." As the conversation shifted to implementation details, Eleanor caught Elon's eye across the table. His slight nod conveyed both gratitude and admiration for how she had navigated the corporate battlefield with wisdom that balanced pragmatism with principle. The meeting concluded with a restructured agreement. The community initiatives would continue with more formalized integration into Tesla's strategic planning and performance metrics. What had begun as a potential termination had transformed into institutional strengthening. As executives filed out of the conference room, Griffith approached Eleanor directly. "Mrs. Wilson, you've given me something to think about regarding the relationship between corporate responsibility and long-term value creation. Perhaps we've been measuring success too narrowly." "It's never too late to expand our perspective, Mr. Griffith," Eleanor replied warmly. "At our age, we have the luxury of seeing how short-term decisions play out over decades." After Griffith departed, Eleanor and Elon found themselves momentarily alone in the conference room. "That," Elon stated with uncharacteristic emotion, "was masterful." "You spoke their language while completely reframing the conversation." Eleanor shook her head modestly. "I simply bridged two worlds that should never have been separated: profitable enterprise and human welfare. They're not opposing forces unless we artificially make them so. The board was prepared to terminate the entire initiative before you spoke," Elon revealed. "Your intervention didn't just save the program. It transformed how they conceptualize community engagement entirely." Before Eleanor could respond, Priya burst into the conference room, her expression animated with excitement. "It worked! The accessibility interface passed all user testing scenarios with elderly and disabled participants. The team is calling it the Eleanor Protocol internally." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That seems rather excessive for a few suggestions about button sizes and contrast ratios." "It's more than that," Priya explained eagerly. "The principles you outlined have become a design philosophy that's spreading beyond the emergency products to our mainstream interfaces. Engineering is calling it invisible technology, systems that support human needs without demanding human adaptation." Elon smiled. "Another example of unexpected impact from our grocery store meeting. Speaking of which," he checked his phone, which had buzzed with a notification. "The judge has dismissed the shareholder lawsuit entirely based on the evidence of competitive manipulation. The legal cloud is lifted." The news brought a sense of closure to the weeks of tension and strategic maneuvering. What had begun as a chance encounter had weathered corporate politics, legal challenges, and public scrutiny to emerge strengthened. "I should get back to my volunteers," Eleanor said, suddenly aware of how far she'd traveled from her quiet life. "Of just a month ago, we're deploying communication hubs in 3 more senior communities this afternoon. Let me drive you," Elon offered, surprising both Eleanor and himself with the spontaneity of the suggestion. "I'd like to see these community hubs in action. As CEO evaluating investment outcomes, of course." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "Of course, purely professional interest." As they walked toward the elevator, they passed a wall of framed magazine covers featuring Elon and Tesla's innovations over the years. Eleanor paused briefly at the most recent edition, a business magazine cover showing Elon standing with a diverse group of community members beside emergency response vehicles. The headline read, "The Human Element: How Tesla's Community First Approach is Redefining Corporate Success." "Interesting that they chose that image rather than another product shot," Eleanor observed. "People connect with people, not products," Elon replied. "Something I sometimes forget in the pursuit of technological solutions." The elevator doors opened, revealing Carlos waiting to escort them. As they descended to the lobby, Eleanor reflected on the remarkable journey that had unfolded from a simple can of soup, nearly falling from a grocery shelf. The butterfly effect of that moment had cascaded through corporate boardrooms, emergency response systems, product designs, and community structures. When they reached the main entrance, they found an unexpected scene. A small crowd of Tesla employees had gathered, apparently through word of mouth, about Eleanor's presence. As she emerged alongside Elon, spontaneous applause erupted. Eleanor froze momentarily, unaccustomed to such recognition. A woman stepped forward from the group, an employee in her 60s whom Eleanor didn't recognize. "Mrs. Wilson, I just wanted to thank you personally," she said, emotion evident in her voice. "My mother lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains and uses an oxygen concentrator. Your volunteers reached her during the power outage when none else could. The emergency battery system they installed literally saved her life." Others stepped forward with similar stories. Parents, grandparents, and vulnerable neighbors whose lives had been touched by the initiative Eleanor had helped shape. What had seemed like abstract corporate decisions in the boardroom were revealed in their true human dimension. As they finally made their way to Elon's car, Eleanor was uncharacteristically quiet, processing the tangible impact of work she'd considered. "Primarily organizational. You've created quite a legacy in just a few weeks," Elon observed as they pulled away from headquarters. "We've created it," Eleanor corrected gently. "The right resources aligned with the right intentions. Neither would have been sufficient alone." As they drove toward the senior center, both recognized that their unlikely friendship had catalyzed something larger than either had anticipated, a model of intergenerational collaboration that leveraged the wisdom of experience and the power of innovation toward a shared vision of community resilience. The true climax wasn't the boardroom victory or the legal vindication, but this moment of witnessing concentric circles of impact spreading outward from their chance encounter, touching lives neither would ever directly meet, yet permanently improving through their combined influence. 6 months after the earthquake that had catalyzed their unlikely friendship, Eleanor sat in her garden, enjoying the first truly warm day of spring. The dahlias were beginning to bloom, their vibrant colors contrasting beautifully against the lush greenery that had flourished after the winter rains. A now familiar Tesla pulled up outside her home, a visit she had been expecting. Elon emerged, carrying a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. As had become their custom over the months, he joined her in the garden without ceremony, accepting the cup of tea she had prepared in anticipation of his arrival. "The community resilience centers are now operating in 17 counties," he reported, settling into what had become his chair. The Eleanor protocol interface has been standardized across all emergency response equipment, and the board has unanimously approved, making the program permanent. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Catherine tells me Michael's team is being expanded to focus exclusively on accessibility innovations. Apparently, it's become one of the most requested transfers. Within the engineering department, the business case made itself, Elon acknowledged. The accessibility features designed for seniors have improved user experience across all demographics. As you predicted, what works for the most vulnerable works better for everyone. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea and enjoying the garden's tranquility, a sharp contrast to the whirlwind of activity that had defined the months following their first meeting. "I brought you something," Elon said finally, offering the package. A small token of appreciation, though. "It hardly seems adequate." Eleanor unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautifully bound book. Opening it, she found photographs, news clippings, and personal testimonials documenting the impact of the Community Resilience Initiative. Elderly residents receiving emergency equipment, volunteers coordinating response efforts, families reunited after communication systems were restored. The final page held a simple inscription: "To Eleanor, who taught us that the most innovative technology is compassion. Thank you for the wisdom that no algorithm could provide." Eleanor closed the book gently, genuinely moved. "Our grocery store encounter certainly took an unexpected path, didn't it?" "The best journeys usually do," Elon replied with a smile. "Though I admit, when I reached for that can of soup, I wasn't anticipating board meetings and legal battles. Nor was I expecting to find myself advising a tech billionaire on human-centered design at my age," Eleanor countered with a chuckle. "Life does enjoy surprising us." As the afternoon light began to soften, their conversation drifted through reflections on the past months and possibilities for the future. The initiatives they had built together had taken root, growing beyond their direct involvement into self-sustaining systems of community care enhanced by thoughtful technology. "You know," Eleanor observed as Elon prepared to leave, "what happened in that grocery store wasn't extraordinary. One person helping another. It happens countless times every day without recognition or viral videos. The extraordinary part was that neither of us walked away afterward." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most important innovations aren't technologies, but relationships, connections that challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding." As they said their goodbyes, both recognized that their friendship had transcended its unlikely beginnings to become something neither would have predicted, but both deeply valued, a bridge between different generations, experiences, and perspectives, proving that genuine human connection remains the most powerful force for positive change. In an increasingly technological world,